our third week of Money Matters, the third part. And this one is on financial management. Now, I always like to review when we're in a series a little bit about the previous week. How many of you were not here last week? Raise your hand. Okay, so that's quite a few of you, so that you're not lost. Last week, we talked about financial contentment. And we talked about how greed is wanting to own it all. I deserve to have it all. But greedy people have a huge ownership problem. And that ownership problem is that all of our resources belong to God. They don't belong to us. We're his managers here on earth of what he releases to us. So greedy people have a real ownership problem. They don't like to think that it belongs to God and they're accountable to him. And their greed is driven by fear. And it's a fear that God won't take care of them. So they must continually get as much as possible and hoard it so that they will be cared for. There's never enough in the greedy person's life. J. Paul Getty, who was a billionaire here in America through oil, he was once asked by a journalist, "You have so many billions, how much is enough?" And J. Paul Getty said, "Well, $1 billion doesn't buy that much anymore." It would buy a lot for me, wouldn't it for you? Okay? But see, it's the same syndrome, whether it's a $10, $100, $1,000, $1 million, billions, there's always more that we want because of greed, or more that we want to hoard because of fear. But last week at the teachings of Jesus in his parables, reminded that there, I think, are 38 parables, and 16 of them, didn't I say? 16, I believe, are all on finances. That Jesus preached more about money than he did heaven and hell combined, because it's so relevant to our practical living every day. So in Jesus' teaching about the rich fool in Luke 12, we see God's answer and perspective and his remedy for greed. And that is to practice contentment, gratitude, and generosity. So we learned it was okay to be rich, but be content, pleased, and grateful. Being content does not mean you will never have more. It means appreciating what you have now. We learned that we're to move from why don't I have enough to why do I have so much. And so today we're going to explore financial planning and a simple, basic understanding of it. I am not a financial advisor. I am not certified to help you in your investments in stocks and bonds, and I'm not certified to talk about all your capital gains and this and that and the other. So that's not what this is going to be about. This is going to be about some very basic, simple truths that we need to think about. There is a quote that says, "A person's treatment of money is the most decisive test of character." Remember, the first week, we talked about what is money, okay? Money's a tool. Money's a test. It's an examination that God gives us to see how we're going to handle it. And money is a testimony. We can create testimonies for eternity by investing in the preaching of the gospel so people's lives can be transformed. So a person's treatment of money is the most decisive test of character, how they make it and how they spend it, okay? Now, we all have limited resources at hand. And I'm going to tell you something. You're going to love this next statement. You can't have everything you want when you want it. Can I hear a big, hearty amen? Okay. You can't have everything you want when you want it. Okay. So there's always more uses for money than money available. There's so many choices, so many things, so many places to go and people to meet. There's just so much out there. So Ron Blue, in his book, Mastering Your Money, has this explanation of financial planning. He says, financial planning is allocating limited financial resources among unlimited alternatives. Financial planning is allocating limited financial resources among unlimited alternatives, making wise decisions that create a positive destiny in our lives, because we can't have it all. You don't like this, do you? Okay? All right. But it's wisdom. Knowing where you are going in life and knowing how to get there helps you become effective. Instead of successful, we're using the word effective. Knowing where you're going and knowing how to get there is what makes you successful or effective in life. Now we're going to look at another parable of Jesus as he's teaching us about finances. It's found in Luke 16, verses 1 through 9. Jesus said to his disciples, there was a certain, now when he talks like that, you're pretty sure that this is a fictitious narrative, that he's making up this story because he's wanting to present a powerful truth. And that's what a parable is. And always when you're looking at a parable, you want to find yourself in the parable. And like if some parables, you could be 1 month one person, another month another person. Like if you look at the Good Samaritan, you know, it may be a time that you feel like the one that's been beaten up. Or another time you're reading the Good Samaritan and you may feel like you're the priest that goes, oh, fushy, I don't want to get involved in that. Or another time you may feel like you're the Good Samaritan. Or maybe the innkeeper. Or maybe the one who beat the guy up and robbed him. So you find yourself in different roles in his stories. In this one, we're the steward. Okay? He also said to his disciples, there was a certain rich man who had a steward. That's us. And an accusation, well, not really, but I mean, we always put ourselves in that role because this is a story he's telling them. He was the best storyteller in the whole wide world. And an accusation was brought to him that this man was wasting his goods. So he called him into the office and he said to him, hey, what is this I hear about you? Give an account of your management, of your stewardship, for you can no longer be a steward. It's like President Trump before he was president. You're fired, okay? Then the steward said within himself, what shall I do? For my master is taking the management, the stewardship, my job away from me. I cannot dig. I'm ashamed to beg. I have resolved what to do. Come up with an idea that when I am put out of the stewardship, when I'm fired and kicked out of here, that I'll have connections. They may receive me into their houses, that I'll have connections. So he called every one of his master's debtors to him and said to the first, how much do you owe my master? And he said, 100 measures of oil. So he said to him, take your bill and sit down quickly and write 50. Then he said to another, and how much do you owe? So he said, 100 measures of wheat. And he said to him, take your bill and write 80. He's giving these guys a real advantage on their debt. And he's knocking off the profit of his boss, the owner. So the master, why would he commend this? Come on, Jesus. This was a horrible thing to do. This was crooked. This was deceitful. He was stealing from his employer behind his back. And he says, so the master commended the unjust steward because he had dealt shrewdly. The boss looked at him and said, wow, you know, this guy is really smart. He's still fired, but he's really smart. For the sons, and this is what God says to us, Jesus is saying to us, for the sons of this world are smarter, are more shrewd in their generation than the sons of light. See, this guy was thinking about his future. He was thinking, down the line, I'm going to need some resources, and I'm going to need some connections, and I'm going to need some investment in these relationships to cover for me down the road because I'm going to have a need. And so he's thinking about his future. And Jesus says, that's a smart thing to do. He says, just go back to the previous. He says, that's a smart thing to do. He said, the people of this world that don't know God or not followers of Jesus, they're smarter than the very sons of light, the very Christians, the very we people, the body of Christ. Sometimes they can be smarter. Why? Because we don't think about money. We don't think about how to establish a good rapport with our money, how to make our money work for us toward the future. Then he goes on to say, and I say to you, make friends for yourselves by unrighteous mammon. In other words, this is filthy lucre. It's unrighteous mammon. It's worldly economy. It's dominated by political economics and world events. And the Bible calls mammon a false god, and you have to choose who you're going to serve, God or mammon or money. And it's filthy lucre. But make friends with it. Get to know your money. Let your money become a part of your expression of worship. That when you fail, and listen, money is like the waves on the seashore. It comes in and it goes out. It comes in and it goes out. So there's going to be times when you have plenty, and there may come times in your life when it seems like the money went out, okay? And you just see the bare necessities of the beach, and then it'll come back in. So you don't put your faith in money, is what Jesus is saying. It'll come, it'll go. But if you make friends with it, and if you think about your future and how you're going to use it, it will receive you into an everlasting home. So everything that we do with money should ultimately have the purpose of being acceptable to God, that he says, welcome home, good and faithful servant. Jesus goes on after this to continue to preach to the Pharisees, and he says, if you're not faithful in a little, you'll never be faithful in much. And so God applauds us when we are wise stewards with our money, and we provide for the future of our children and their education if they're going to go to college. When we provide for the future of our family, going on vacations so we can create memories that will last a lifetime and connect with one another outside the busyness of everyday schedules. The Lord applauds us when we think how this money is going to affect our future and how we can best invest it. And one of the best investments is bringing testimonies alive in the lives of people. And you will meet that in eternity, okay? It'll be treasures stored up where the thief and the moth cannot come in and rob and deteriorate it, because money will come and money will go. But if you think about what you're doing with a futuristic perspective, you'll make wise decisions that will fulfill destinies that will last through eternity. That's what Jesus is saying. Let's give him an applause. Amen. So, he's saying, I want you to be as smart, but for what is right. And the problem with us sometimes as Christians, we go, oh, well, God will take care of it. I'm going to get this new car, and the payment's really going to push the limits, but God will take care of it. Okay? And Jesus is saying, no, don't live that way. Yes, God will take care of us, but think before we leap. Think, sit down, and reason together with the Lord so that filthy lucre can be used for blessing and not for cursing. We need to think about money, to have a plan and a schedule, and know that we don't own this money. It belongs to God, and he's entrusted it to us, so we don't want to overbook it. I'm notorious in the past, I don't do it so much anymore, of overbooking myself. And Claudia and Norman would get so upset with me because I'll accept 2-3 invitations for the same time period. And then I have to go back and retract and reorganize, and it's painful, and you lose friends, and it's a mess. So you have to learn to have your agenda and not overbook your money. So if you're using a credit card, let's say, and on the 3rd of the month, you come across this great deal or whatever it is that we'll charge it. We have enough cash flow that we can pay this when the bill comes in. But then you forget about it. Nobody understands this, okay? And come the 25th or 22nd or later on in the month, you go, oh, yeah, we can afford that. And so we charge it. And then the bill comes in and go, I forgot about the charge at the beginning. I overbooked my money. Hello? Because I didn't think about scheduling it properly. All right? So we need to know what we owe and when we owe it and not overbook. And then we need to think about how we treat people that we owe, our creditors, whoever they might be. We need to treat them with honesty and respect, the same way you would want to be treated. Love others, okay? And do to others the way you love God and yourself, and the way you would want to be treated, the golden rule. When you cannot pay your creditors, don't hide from them. Make arrangements with them. Communicate with them. Because you can hide and they can find, okay? But if you will be honest and upright and call them if you absolutely cannot pay and say, I owe this, and if it's the last thing I ever do before I die, I will pay this bill. Can you work with me? What kind of an arrangement can we make until I get a new job, until I'm back on my feet? I was let go unexpectedly. We were caught off guard, but we know we owe this, and we know it's an honest debt, and we must pay it, and we will. And that's your best shot, okay? You want to treat others the way you want to be treated. When people owe you, you want to be respected. You want them to talk to you. You have the ability to forgive them their debt. They may decide, you know what, it's okay. You don't know. But the favor of God is ours. And if we believe that we are favored of God, these are the moments we need to exercise that favor and not try to get out of paying what we owe, but communicating and making sure we don't hide amongst the stuff we've accumulated and defraud people who need our payment to pay what they owe. Okay, we need to think, Jesus says, about our money. When we go to H-E-B for lettuce or Walgreens for I'll preach to me. Go to Walgreens, I need toothpaste. But I don't take just $5 to go in there to get my toothpaste. And I kind of sidetrack by the cosmetic bar. They have so many interesting things there. And then they're the only ones that sell the skinny popcorn that Norman and I like. But I go and get us 2 bags of popcorn, which that's not an extravagance, but it's right there by those little pints of ice cream for 280 calories or 320 calories for the whole pint. You know, I've seen you there, okay? And then I go around and I look at some other things, the dark chocolate, and to go with the popcorn. Oh, the cherry Cokes to go with the popcorn and the dark chocolate. And by the time I get up to the checkout, I've spent $58. And I went for a less than $5 toothpaste. None of you do that. Okay? And that's what we need to think. You know, Norman and I used to be on such a reduced budget. And I remember I was the jail keeper of the money, working the finances and paying the bills. And I would know we have $40 in the black. And so then I remember one time I went to Walmart and I said, I've got $30. I calculated $38.65. and I was able to pay for it and write a check. I knew it wouldn't bounce, but when I got home, Norman walks in from Target, and hello? We didn't schedule our money, okay? Because we didn't communicate. And it's very important to get over the barrier of lack of communication in a family over your finances if you're going to work to not overbook them and to think about scheduling them and thinking about discipline. You know, it's amazing how we can go into the store for one thing and come out with a basket full of stuff. And then we can say, oh, we really need to pray for Johnny Bucket Mouth, okay? He's addicted to gambling. It must be a demon. We need to fast and pray and get it out of him. He went to the casino at Kickapoo just to have a little bit of fun, and he stayed there all night long and lost everything he owned. Kind of like Walgreens. Kind of like Walgreens, okay? Spending addiction. We need to think about it and conquer it. Have you noticed how some people break their spending addiction cold turkey immediately in church when we receive the offering? Now, they know how to send those bucks in. Okay, here's a quote. Money talks, but all mine ever says is goodbye, okay? So we need to think about our present situations and establish goals because today's decisions determine destiny. In Proverbs 13:11, it says, whoever gathers money little by little makes it grow. So, you know, very rarely is there going to be a get-rich-quick scheme that's going to work. It's the methodic, step by step, little by little, okay? What's the old saying? You can't eat an elephant in one bite, but you can eat an elephant bite by bite. And that's the way it is with debt. That's the way it is in saving something for the future. It's not going to all happen immediately, but bite by bite, step by step. So grow my money? You got to be kidding, Pastor Sandra. There's no growing my money. I don't have any money to grow, okay? But that's not true. This works if you're a child receiving $1 a week allowance. This works if you're a teenager with $30 a week cash flow. This works if you make 1,000, if you make 100,000, if you make $1 million or $1 billion. This works from $1 on up, from 50 cents on up. This works. How do you make your money grow? See, you didn't know. You think, my goodness, Pastor Sandra, she's a certified financial consultant. Man, this woman's a genius. No wonder I like to go to that church. It's so smart. It's so well equipped. This woman can just tell you anything about every subject. I'm going to tell you. You ready? How will you make your money grow? By spending less than you earn. And do it over a long period of time. If you make $1, you give 10% to God, and you give 10% to yourself. And you put it aside so you can build the cash flow. And you've got 80% left to deal with wisely. It's the same if you make $1,000. You give 100 to God, you put 100 to yourself, you pay yourself, so you build up a cash flow little by little. And there is where you're beginning to make the potential of investments to grow your money in long-range goals that benefit your life and benefit your family. So it works no matter how much money you make, all right? Because margin in economics, in your daily life and mine, is very important. Young people, listen to this. Now, you can get good books. I would recommend Ron Blue's Mastering Your Money. And in that, he has all kinds of charts that will show you. Of course, you have to understand, you look at these books and you see when they were printed and you see how much the markets have changed and how, you can put money in a savings account and at the end of the year you get $12.13. I mean, it's where it is with percentages right now in savings. So things fluctuate. But there's some basic truths in there if you're really interested in how to build margin. Margin is your cash flow, and we need to control it, and we need to increase it. That's why credit cards are fine, but credit cards are like invisible spending. You can just whip them out, and you don't feel the pain as you would if that money was cash in an envelope, and you had to take it out and pay cash for that item that you quickly swiped that card for. Now, it's necessary to have cards if you are going to travel because you today cannot buy a plane ticket with cash. You have to use a credit card. You can't go into a hotel with cash. You can come out with cash, but you can't register with cash. They won't allow you to say, okay, my room was $110. Here, let me give you the $110 as I check in. They won't accept that. You have to give them a credit card. That's their security over any damage you do to the room or anything you sign for. When you leave, you can pay with cash, and your credit card is zero, some of the balance that you owe them. But you have to have that to be able to travel. So some of the young people I know have listened to financial gurus, and they say, oh, no, we're not supposed to have credit cards. And I say, that's fine, as long as you never go anywhere, okay? But if you're going to go somewhere, you need to learn how to use them and use them with discipline and not just swipe them, because it's painless to swipe that thing, okay? You don't feel it until you get the bill and you go, this is impossible. There's a mistake here. I don't owe this. This is fraud. Yeah, you owe it, okay? All right, so we have to build margin and take control of our cash flow and increase it. Now, we think of ourselves as a business, and we should. The Church of Crossroads is a living organism of believers in a community that are following Jesus together. And that's a very spiritual, almost mystical, glorious thing that we are as the body of Christ and as a church. But we also, as the leadership here, have to treat the Crossroads like a business, because there's so many things that we have to do that's just like any other corporation or industry that we have to take care of. And so we have learned certain things about running business. Well, I would say that Norman and Sandra Howell are a business. And my husband has said this to me on many occasions. Doesn't mean we're not a romance. It doesn't mean that we're not in love. It doesn't mean that we're not, super passionate for one another. But we are also partners in the business of our lives, marriage, and home. And you are a business. So let's say, okay, in our business, just as an example, we own a chicken farm. Partial to chicken farms. Almost married a chicken farmer. Okay? But thank God I didn't. It's another day, another dollar, another story. Okay? But we own a chicken farm. And on that chicken farm, we have thousands of chickens. And we produce eggs. And we have a contract with IHOP. And we sell them our eggs. So there's certain things that we have to take care of. And we have to make sure that we are clean, that there's no risk for any bird virus going on. So we have to hire people to keep all of the farm and all of the cages and all of the places where the chickens are very, very clean. And we have to pay vet bills to keep the birds happy. We have to get the best of feed so they will produce the best organic eggs. We have to do all of these things. We have to have trucks. We have to have people that drive the trucks to transport to the headquarters of IHOP. We have to have accountants. We have to have janitors. We have to have all of these employees. And so we make good money with IHOP. But when the money comes in, we have to pay everybody. And after we've paid everybody out of our initial profit, there's no margin, there's no net profit left to pay ourselves. And so this business is on shaky ground. And we realize we can't go on like that. So we go to the bank and we ask the bank for a loan. And the bank looks at our books and says, but your business is not gaining any profit for you. So if you're not investing in you, why should we invest in you? And you can take that down many different avenues, okay? You have to have some sort of margin, some sort of collateral, some sort of cash flow, some sort of net profit going on to have a stable business. And you are a business. We are a business. And so we think, well, what shall we do? We have three options. We can just keep doing the same thing we're doing, and eventually we're going to go under, okay? We can't sustain that forever. Or our second option is we can go out and find another vendor to sell our eggs to. And so we can go out and search for Walmart or whoever, another H-E-B, another vendor that will buy our eggs at a price that is competitive with others so that they can also make a net profit for their business. And so that's an option, is we can get a new vendor. But there's going to be problems there. We can't raise our expenditures to everyone else to be able to make that new profit. So that means we've got to convince everyone around us to be on that team and to sacrifice their lives and times and energy to make that objective come true. Or the third option is we begin to pass out pink slips and we fire people. And if we fire people, now there's a possibility, not paying that out to everyone else, we've got some cash flow available to pay ourselves and to make a net profit. You say, well, how does that refer to me in my business? Well, it's like this. If we keep doing, this is what Jesus said in the parable, at least be as smart as this unjust servant. He was thinking about his future. How can I line myself up to a more secure future, even if things look kind of bad right now? And he thought about it. And Jesus wants us to think in the right way. So if I'm doing the same thing I've always been doing, and there's never any margin, there's never any net profit, there's never any savings, there's never any money to invest in wise choices, then I'm going to go under. And I'm going to end up just living from paycheck to paycheck, living from paycheck to paycheck with nothing to show for all of my labor. Or I can find a second job. I can go out and find a second job, and that's very viable, and it's very good, and you can do that as long as you don't take what you get from that second job and spend it without thinking, instead of investing it as a margin for your future or for some great long-range goal that God may have given you. Now, there's going to be a cost to the people in your business, like your children, your wife, your husband, because of your absence and your fatigue. So you have to think, are those that are on my team in my business willing to pay the price for me having a second job to bring in for these long-term goals? And sometimes that might be good, sometimes it might not be wise. So you have a third option, and that is to begin to fire people. And that's probably your best option, is you look around in your life and you say, you're fired. You're fired. You're fired. And you take that money that you were paying them and you create your own cash flow margin to be able to develop the long-term goals that God has given you. And that is being wise. You're thinking not just about the moment, but about the future. Who do I fire? That seems so cruel. The other day, Norman was with a friend in the car, and they passed a guy that was a professional car washer. He had all of his professional equipment, and he was washing the car. And the friend said to Norman, Pastor, you're so busy. And every Saturday you take several hours and you go out there and you wash your cars. That's what you need to do. You need to pay that guy to do it. And Norman turned and he says, no, I prefer paying myself. Someone came to me and said, I had to fire the lady that does my pedicure and my manicure at the nail salon. I had to fire them so that I would have a margin enough to set some aside and also pay for a gym membership that I felt like would profit me more. But instead of just accumulating the gym on top of the nail salon, you have to make a decision who you're going to fire. You might have to fire Starbucks. I don't know how much you spend there, but you know what? There's those little whipped cream red and white bottles at H-E-B for $3, and they'll last you probably a coffee a day for 3 weeks, and you can brew your coffee, a little bit of cinnamon. The cinnamon jar will last you 2 years. Hey, fire Starbucks, okay? But be disciplined to take that money and put it aside to create a margin so that you can begin to progress in life and you don't end up going, my God, all my life I have worked to pay everybody else and I've never been paid myself, okay? So we want to give, amen. So we want to give 10% to the Lord. First off, 10% to God. Now, God owns it all. He owns all 100%. So at any given time, he may ask you for a bigger hunk of it. It's his anyway. But he's put 10% to keep the lights on in places like this where his church operates, okay? And then beyond that, you give offerings, and we'll talk about that next week. But 10% to God, 10% to yourself, that leaves you 80% to manage. Good financial stability is that you not use more than 50% of that for the basic needs of shelter and transportation, and you use the other 30% as a cash flow. I used to put it in envelopes, the other 30% in envelopes, and carry them around, because that way when we needed one little, this, or we go to a restaurant or whatever, we just pay it out of the envelope. So when the envelope's empty, hey, it's gone, okay? And it's so that you kept a balance. But, we need to get some discipline into our life for financial planning. All right, so we're coming to the end. We want to develop a cash flow margin by either getting a second job or firing someone. And next week, we'll talk about this little handout. But I want to tell you this. We have all failed when it comes to financial decisions. And there is no shame. There should be no lasting regret. Just enough regret to educate us, but not to torment us, okay? No shame, no discouragement, or no pride and superiority like it's a spiritual badge because you got money and you were wise in the handling of it, but yet your heart is filled with all kinds of pride and arrogance over it. That's not cool either. So we need to guard our hearts. And the good news is our money issues are a part of the gospel of Jesus Christ as much as forgiveness of sins and healing for our bodies or any of the promises that God has for us. God will use both wise and foolish decisions to teach us to prosper. And he says it is his will to teach our hands to prosper. God doesn't want us living the rest of our lives by the skin of our teeth. That's why he didn't put any skin on our teeth. He wants us to be able to enjoy life, to savor it, to taste and see that the Lord is good, and we surrender to him our finances that he has allowed us to manage, that in reality belong to him, and he gives us wisdom and prudence and patience and self-discipline and free from addictions, so that we can prosper in all of our ways.
This is the end of our teaching. For more information, visit thecrossroads.org, download our app, or visit any of our social media platforms. Thank you for watching.